what happens when you're supporting Africa and the Middle East for years and years with all of these social programs, and then all of a sudden one day you pull the plug? They're not going to be happy, and they're going to go look at China and say, will you guys help us? And China's going to help them.
And they already are.
But they're going to help them in a lot of a different way. Where doesn't he have his hands in? But I bet you those programs aren't being cut. I bet you those programs aren't.
It's funny that you say that, because shockingly they're not. And a lot of these agencies that are being targeted for cuts are also agencies that have investigated him for various instances of foul play.
If anybody self-labels themselves as a Christian nationalist, you need to back away from that person, because that's really bleeding into fascism. The woke left, which we know focuses on identity politics, but then the woke right, who does the same thing. You've got this socialism, and then you've got this fascism. Listen, when you have Sharia law, you need DEI. Like, I don't like DEI.
I think
you need it there. We have very different viewpoints on many things.
But a lot of these issues are American issues. They're not Republican or Democrat issues.
Welcome back to Elevated Thoughts. Today we are returning to our roots. Mike and I talking about what has happened in the news, specifically what is reaching headlines more than anything, the gutting of USAID. And I'm not talking foreign aid, as in we're rebuilding after a war. That's what everyone thinks. USAID, the United States Agency for International Development. Huh? Mike, what are your take on what Elon Musk is doing over there?
Very much a lot of throwing out the baby with the bathwater. You know, I'm not naive. There's surely some fraud or misspending or, good intentioned programs that just didn't accomplish what they achieved. And, that's what reform and refining the mission is all about. But to entirely gut the budget and say every last penny of it is fraud, I think is hyperbolic, to say the least. I think that's doing not enough justice to the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the Trump's press secretary recently said something weird. And notice I asked you, how do you feel about Elon Musk? Turns out that Elon Musk is some sort of special government employee, and he's not actually the head of Doge. So I'm going to play a clip right here.
About a federal judge yesterday was saying that they didn't know who the Doge administrator was, and was asking the lawyer for the administration who it was, and the lawyer responded, "I don't know the answer to that. Can you tell us who the administrator of Doge is?"
Again, I've been asked and answered this question. Elon Musk is overseeing Doge. Elon Musk is a special government employee, which I've also been asked and have answered that question as well. There are career officials at Doge. There are political appointees at Doge. I'm not going to reveal the name of that individual from this podium. I'm happy to follow up and provide that to you. But we've been incredibly transparent about the way that Doge is working.
So obviously Elon has some special credentials, and for whatever reason, in the same breath, literally as saying they're being transparent, they are being anything but transparent. So, hey, I'm the right-wing guy here. I'm throwing up my hands. I'm saying, guys, this is too quick, too fast, too reckless. What is really going on here? I mean, Mike, what is the left wing saying about this?
Well, I mean, we're just having a field day with this, because this is what, talk show hosts and the media really looks forward to, is when the opposition is in power, because we just have tons and tons of content. But now it's not just hyperbolic, it's legitimate. I mean, you see them firing off a bunch of crucial staff who then they have to rehire, and, to tie into how untransparent they're being, they're not even disclosing about how many people they've rehired. And I'm talking about in programs surrounding, tracking the bird flu, emerging pandemic, as well as tracking, our national stockpiles of nuclear energy and things like that, and weapons grade material. So they're, rashly firing all these people, only to then after the fact realize how important those roles and functions are. This speaks to how complex government is, and that you can't really just go in with a wrecking ball and reform everything. Though I understand, as the Trump administration feels that they only have maybe 9 months to really get things accomplished, because the way the political calendar works, the midterms are going to be right around the corner.
I will say that I appreciate the vigor, right? You get into office as a new president and you definitely want to put your foot down, right? The first couple days with executive orders was like, whoa. But the truth is that those and whoa in a good way, to clarify, those executive orders, though, have a level of transparency, right? They're published online. They have full text that's very clear and detailed to explain what's going on. When we see the updates from Doge, it's like a dollar sign, a negative number that we've saved here, and then a headline of what the program that was cut. But we've seen a lot of these programs have kind of been like, hey, wait a minute, we probably could have used that. Are you sure you want to cut it? Right. I saw one about, what was it? A TV show in Iraq, I think. And a lot of it's DEI, right? But do you have the numbers in front of you of what this specific program, because I think it's a good example as to what we're cutting, but what it actually means in the real world, right?
Absolutely. So we're referencing, and I have a nice tweet that we can plug in here from someone who did much better reporting on this than I could have ever. But the program is called Elon Simsim and is essentially Arabic Sesame Street. And it wasn't just Iraq; it was in places in Syria and just all of the Arabs. All of the Arabic-speaking world. And what's really important is these are these outreach programs that build impressions upon other peoples around the world. So the only thing they don't know about America is our very large military footprint. They also know about our humanitarian efforts around the world. And they're very, very impactful. And I do have some numbers ahead of me. And this is what's the thing about USAID is that there wasn't these billions and billions of dollars that were poured into this program. It was jointly funded, $20 million from USAID, as well as lots of money from the Lego Foundation and other charitable partners, right? So this wasn't just the U.S. government footing the entire bill, but also to talk about the impact that it had. The MacArthur Foundation, who is the body that administrates this program and gives access to it, says that reached about 5.2 million children in Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria across their seasons 1 and 2, and they had 12 million viewers in the wider region altogether. So I think the last total estimate was about 23 million children total have seen the show. And the research has shown that they have better emotional regulation and they have better language and communication skills. And if nothing else, I think that is a very good way to spend U.S. dollars. But if you also want to talk about these other humanitarian programs, a lot of people are concerned about the way the money's spent. They don't realize that a lot of this money gets respent back in the U.S., right? So it's allocated towards Africa or Ukraine, but our companies and our humanitarian organizations are the ones that do the funding. So it's really like the country is keeping all of this money. And then a lot of these development projects are reciprocal, that's industry that's important to us, right? So it's mutual business done between both of our countries. So again, tons of fraud in certain areas, I'm sure, but to get rid of the entire budget, I think was very rash.
So when we think about the country and the culture in like Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, or I think you said Georgia, these Jordan, countries, yep. Jordan, it was, okay.
Yep.
These countries are like, in many cases, probably have Sharia law. I mean, they don't have women allowed to read or even go to school. So my understanding would be like an educational program would probably be a pretty good thing. And to your point, what you've mentioned, right? All the people in the Middle East who go, America bad, they keep bombing us with drones. Now they're saying, oh, America's not so bad. Not so bad because they're giving us entertainment. They're giving us value. They're giving us education. They're lifting democratic principles, right? It's funny that conservatives, Republicans were always all about spreading democracy, spreading democratic principles. And now when we're like functionally carrying that out, what we want to do is gut it to get this populist messaging where all of the money must be spent in-house, all of our manufacturing must be done here. We hate immigrants because illegal immigrants have ruined immigration. And it's just like too far. And then to couple this with now the press secretary saying, yeah, Elon Musk is overseeing it, but I don't know. Now I have another clip to add here. And this is the exact same press secretary in the exact same press briefing saying something equally as insane.
Some of those cabinet members were caught off guard by the email from
Nobody
Saturday.
was caught off guard.
A few departments said they were caught off guard. The FBI was, the DOJ was.
Did anonymous sources say that, or did the cabinet secretary say that?
The cabinet secretaries and others have said that they were not aware that this was happening. So I'm wondering, will there be a give and take tomorrow at the cabinet meeting? Is Elon Musk or the president open to any type of dialogue about who is actually in charge of the chain of command of these workers?
I would reject the premise of your question, Jeff. The cabinet secretaries have not said that. I know anonymous sources, probably career bureaucrats, have leaked that to many of you in this room. But as I said at the beginning of this press conference, everybody is working as one team.
So as we saw, this reporter is trying to tell them, no, your cabinet positions are telling us we weren't aware of this email. Even Trump himself is like, well, I could name 5 things I did last week. I guess that's what they said. Doesn't even seem to be aware of it. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. Let me be clear, right, Mike? Like, if you asked me what I did last week at work and only 5 things, I could definitely tell you, and I definitely add value to the company. But if I was the clerk at the DMV, I don't know that I'd be able to tell you I processed applications, right?
Right.
That's not exactly a stakeholder.
Listen, bureaucrat has unfortunately become a dirty word, but they're the important administrators that make this complex government machine work. And yes, in many ways, our government has a lot of shortcomings, but I think people need to take a look at much more dysfunctional countries to really understand the value that our country does bring, and at a remarkably low tax rate compared to like the Western world. Like anywhere else in these other developed nations, you're going to pay a much higher income tax rate comparably. So, but it's starting to get off the point here is because I think transparency is the really like the big issue here is because there seems to be such, well, generally a lack of it, but there's ulterior motives to a lot of these things. So to tie into this lack of transparency, this whole tariff situation just stinks of ulterior motives because when you look at the hard numbers, and I'm going to talk about steel and aluminum because that's where Recycle Mike gets his moniker from. I'm from the recycling industry, so like we import 50% of our aluminum from Canada. There's no reason to screw up that trade relationship because there's not enough companies here to start up. That would take years and many, many millions, if not billions of dollars to start up. But what people don't realize is it's not the raw aluminum where the money's made. It's aluminum end users, right? So when they turn those into aluminum cans or they turn them into the flatbeds of your pickup truck or something like that, it's the end product that has a lot more value. So sure, there's these trade deficits and imbalances where we're exporting more copper than, we're actually consuming and importing and using here. But that's a good thing, is because we're selling a cheap raw material, in that case, to somewhere else. We get to bring in a slightly more finished product, and then we turn that into wire, and we turn it into, semiconductors and things of that nature. So it's really these value-added products that are the backbone of, American manufacturing, and putting tariffs on them is not going to improve that situation. It's not going to bring manufacturing back here to any large degree. So it has to be ulterior motives in my mind.
Well, you've got, honestly, and listen, I this is an interesting episode for me because 48 episodes, whatever we're in now, right? I'm the right-wing guy. I support Trump, and I still do. I actually, look at this, I'm wearing the X hat to show I have some level of respect for Elon Musk. In fact, actually a lot, I'll say that. But lately, over the last couple of weeks, it's been like alarming to me, alarming. I'm waving the flag. I'm saying, whoa, can we please look a little closer at this? He is now, right, he's like the largest government contractor in the world. He's I should say in the country, but he's NASA effectively. He's becoming transportation systems with the Boring Company. He's going to become this everything app with X. He's like, electric vehicles and charging stations funded by the government. Like, where doesn't he have his hands in? But I bet you those programs aren't being cut. I bet you those programs aren't.
It's funny that you say that because shockingly they're not. And a lot of these agencies that are being targeted for cuts are also agencies that have investigated him for various instances of foul play. So
like the SEC and all of that. Yeah,
absolutely. So, people hate these regulations and things like that, but there's a reason why. These are the guardrails on our democracy and things like that. And I try not to be, go into the talking points of the pre-election, but it really does kind of feel like that. There's just too many parallels from the fall of the Roman Republic, the rise of Sulla and Julius Caesar, and I don't want to get too deep into the weeds here, but we're at kind of a crossing of the Rubicon moment, and the emergence of that term is there's this Rubicon River that separated Rome from the northern half, and the rule was that any returning general had to disband his legions. You could not enter Rome under, military guard or force, and that was to show that, you weren't a king. They had gotten rid of those a long time ago, and Caesar had done something. He crossed the Rubicon with his legions when they denied him the consulship or the equivalency of the presidency. So I feel like we're really in this moment where Trump, felt like he was trying to be denied of his presidency, and now he's crossed the Rubicon with his legions, and that's why you see him slashing budgets here, attacking departments and things there. And listen, I'm hopeful because I have to be. I hate being so pessimistic. I hope that they achieve what they set out to do. But I think we're losing track of this conversation. Was he not elected on trying to bring down inflation, or at least, the cost of living or the things that like eroded our purchasing power? Not tracking the bird flu. And for instance, I couldn't get eggs today, from 2 different supermarkets, right?
What?
Like, Yeah, let's not be firing those scientists who are trying to track the spread of this epidemic and get it under control. Enacting all these tariffs on these products that come into our country is going to raise the cost of goods. I promise you, when, Novelis, which is a consumer of aluminum alloys that makes them into aluminum can alloys, when all of a sudden they're paying more for their product, they're going to raise that cost onto the other manufacturers, and you're going to feel it ultimately. They're talking about eliminating the penny. This is a funny one. That's another guest I want to reach out to, actually. He's an advocate for the penny, and that's what he does.
Yeah, what is the value of the penny? I hate it.
So listen, I hate it too, but it costs, I think, 3.7 cents to make, right? So you say
it's terrible.
So you say, oh, this is crazy. We're losing, almost 4 times the amount that it's worth. But it actually does create contracts from an American company. So there's American jobs there. We consume copper.
Pennies.
Yeah, we consume copper, so that whether it's from American customers, it's still a value-added product that's brought into the U.S. and creates those jobs, stimulates the economy. But most importantly, if you get rid of the penny, you're going to feel 1 to 3% inflation immediately, because everything's going to be rounded up to the nearest nickel. So, right? So,
well, I had an idea. I don't necessarily buy what you just said, to be honest. I don't care about those jobs. They'll find new jobs. That's like 2 factories. Go away, guys.
Sure.
Automate it. Again, I'll say it every time. When is the port strike ending? Because we're going to automate them out too.
Right.
But no, the truth is, like, I had this idea. What if instead of this Doge, or instead of abolishing the IRS, like you're saying, or do all of those things, but then take the pennies, round up, in the same way that Walgreens asked me to donate to their slush fund, give it to the Treasury Department slush fund. They'll take my 6 cents and they'll love it. That's a lot of money. Maybe could reduce the tolls that they put in New York City when I try to drive that way. So you used the word guardrails, and actually just yesterday, Elon Musk tweeted something pretty kind of not great, maybe even authoritarian. But before I read that out, I just want to remind everyone, guys, we put a lot of time and effort into putting these shows out, and we try to make sure that we're giving our unfiltered opinions, giving you good data, trying to break from party lines and this monolithic thought that we've all come to hate. The best way to support us is to please hit that subscribe button, hit that like and comment button. And then also, if you are watching on Spotify, leave us a review. Guys, that will be the #1 way to help us and allow us to continue this programming, which we hope you find valuable, and we can keep reaching out to awesome guests. So please follow, like, subscribe. This is the first time I'm doing a plug. Hopefully it worked. So Elon Musk tweeted, quote, "If any judge anywhere can block every presidential order everywhere, we do not have democracy. We have tyranny of the judiciary." Mike, if you said something and you were a person of power, or let's say you were a business owner or even a government official, and the judiciary said, no, you can't do that, do we maybe have guardrails in place to potentially, I'm not even going to use the word because it's going to give it away.
No, but I mean, it's totally
deal.
Yeah, exactly. Right. This totally defeats the whole purpose of the process. I mean, it's literally complaining about, if the judiciary just didn't have these checks and balances, it's the whole purpose of having these separate divisions in our government.
Fucking crazy, man.
Yeah. You know what it is I think they feel themselves to be philosopher kings, and, if I just had this, listen, history is full of those folks who manage to, have consolidated, unchecked power and do really, really good things with it. But it's often a roll of the dice. And that's what's unique about our democracy, is that, we remove that whole roll of the dice thing. I think it should really speak to the durability of our government, our institutions, and our democratic republic to have this swing of different types of presidencies over the last 20 years. Let's look at where we've gone. And now even to re-elect Donald Trump. I'm just going to say, if your concerns are ever about some sort of deep state or large-scale corruption and rigging of the elections, why didn't they do it this time around, right? But
this was the most existential to our democracy, wasn't it?
I mean, if you listen to everybody up till, the day before the election, that's what the Democratic Party was saying. But there's things I really wish the administration would focus on. I feel like they're getting lost in the weeds. And this is the problem, is the game of politics, right? That's what it is. It's a game. It's gamesmanship, and it's figuring out what the other person's maybe going to do and try to block that maneuver beforehand. And then they'd become these ideological talking points that the media then just blasts out. And then that's all we're ever doing, is focusing on that, right? I think we need to be talking about getting tough on China and Iran. And if there was one thing I actually supported this administration's positions were those things coming in. But now we're talking about tariffing our neighbors, and then, maybe we'll get a nice trade deal with China. And I'm just saying, well, why didn't it work out the first time around, right? Shouldn't we have gotten a trade deal with them?
Didn't just on a nitpicking point, didn't we reverse Mexico and Canada tariffs?
We put a pause on them for 1 month.
Okay, so actually, like right now, is they're going to come back?
So this is the problem, right? Think about all these countries, right? Companies across.
Yeah, they're searching for sourcing. Yeah,
they're multinational companies, right? So they're integrated supply chains now. It's not the world of 100 plus years ago where a tariff was very effective. We have a very interconnected world that has net positives and net negatives in different areas. But one of those positives is to be able to say like, oh, as a company, I could ship this part to Mexico. They can do things to it, and then they could ship it back for a certain cost. And that saves me a ton of money. It makes me a more competitive company, so I can lower my costs to do, to outcompete my neighbors and try to earn more market share, right? Like, isn't that the whole point of this capitalist experience? That's the free trade promise, right?
I like it. I prefer that.
In that regard, it's really like who does something well enough. And oftentimes it's really labor costs are a large part of it, but it's not just labor costs. It is technological investments, right? So there's a reason why a lot of stuff goes to China. It's not just because of their labor. It's because they have tons of industrial parks and enterprise development parks and this and that where they've had 50, 70 years of, specializing, making this type of battery or this type of semiconductor. That's why Temu is just the latest iteration of a long line of companies that produce these things. They have tons of infrastructure in place. We could do things in the U.S. Maybe we can come close to cost effectiveness because we're way more productive per employee in the United States. But there's just certain trade advantages that it just makes sense to, let them make it and let us import it and then resell it for a higher value. And Americans get, to make money off of these products that are resold, and you get cheaper goods at the end of the day. I mean, that's what makes our quality of life that much higher is because we have so many goods. So
this is the good time for me, though, to step in and kind of defend tariffs in this way, right?
Okay.
Because I don't know that I'm necessarily a staunch defender of tariffs. I don't purport to be an economist whatsoever, and I'll certainly be corrected, and I'm willing to be. But when I worked in manufacturing for a period where I actually made aluminum castings as well. I represented foundries, both domestic and in China, Singapore. And what we found, or what I observed, basically, not that's a business, as they exist, they didn't find it, but what I observed was the same part that I could manufacture in the United States for like $3,000, that would be made to the exact same specification and standards for like $400 in China, shipped.
Yep.
So you're not talking about, it's 10% less. You're talking about it's 80%, 70, 80% less.
Yeah.
So now, and you've talked in weeks past or months past about oversupply and government subsidization. What we're thwarting with tariffs is that practice, right? Because now their $400 part is going to be closer to $800. Maybe the United States suppliers are getting more business. They can become more competitive. There's going to be more onshoring. There is a path to say, okay, we've kind of attacked their government with this economic war in a way. And now we have the ability, yes, it's going to feel some pain. Any war will. But at the end of the day, we're going to ultimately correct the imbalance because they're being manipulative and we can't allow that, right? So isn't there value to that?
There is value in tariffs, in targeted tariffs, in my opinion. So I think, you target specific industries, specific sectors, and not blanket countrywide tariffs, because it just lacks the nuance of, the intricacies of a trade relationship. I think you should tariff the crap out of some stuff, regarding China, and we do. Don't get me wrong. I mean, that's what you have to do to their oversupply, the dumping of goods. I mean, we do have like 100 to 200%, tariff rates on certain things, and that was done under Trump. Extended under Biden. Actually, this is not talked about enough. We've brought it up a few times in the show, but a lot of people don't talk about it. The Biden administration complained about, or the Democrats complained about tariffs and this trade war, and Trump didn't know what he was doing. And then they quietly kept most, if not all, of those tariffs and even raised a lot of them. But like I said, it didn't affect the trade deficit all that much. In fact, actually under Biden, it expanded. That meant that China got even more market share. Despite the tariffs, they were able to still continue to dump their goods. And our good friend Dmitry Perlovich brought up on his show is, then you saw these weird things that the Chinese are very good at. They're able to set up shop overnight in another country or buy from certain partners. Like he talked about how Kazakhstan all of a sudden became this major importer of extremely high-end semiconductors. Well, they do the same thing in reverse, right? So they'll set up a distributor or a manufacturing company somewhere in Malaysia is a common thing, or in Indonesia and other partner Southeast Asia countries that aren't subject to these tariffs, right? So they'll just open up a Chinese subsidiary in that country and they'll just dump products through that way, and that's how they get around it. So,
do you know anything about the source of the Canadian aluminum? I've read something that might be Chinese-based, raw material or something.
So this is the thing: is we export a ton to China, we import a ton through countries that have different, exactly, that are generated different places. It's because all aluminum is not aluminum. There are different alloys.
Same with like gas, right? There's crude and
right.
And
so I mean,
sour,
there's like the 6000 series of aluminum, and there's quite a few 6000 series aluminums that are very, very different in what they do. Some are structural, and even just the tiniest fractions of a percent difference in certain other metals that are in there because they're not pure changes the alloy, and now you can't use it for structural materials. It can only be for clippings and things of that nature. So now you have to deal with this complicated chemistries and alloys, and that's why you just kind of let the marketplace deal with it. This is why the capitalist model or free market model is so robust, because top-down, legislation and tariffs will never be able to address all the nuances of it. But if you let the market kind of dictate how trade flows should go, because this is where the material ends up flowing and we all make the most money out of it, and then those finished goods come back to this country where we can turn them into more useful products, right? Like I said, let's not trip over pennies, or I'm sorry, tripping over dollars chasing after pennies is the expression. That's really what's going to happen with the steel, aluminum, and even copper tariffs that they're floating. You're focused on the wrong end of here, which again brings me back to my point is they have to know that. I'm going to give them at least the benefit of the doubt is they're not that stupid. There's other, designs for these tariffs, right? They don't necessarily want to rescue the American aluminum industry, but they want to extort something from Canada, even if it's nothing but a political win, just to be able to say.
They outright said, right, stop the fentanyl. That was there. It's like, what?
But
how does that?
But Canada recovered twice as many trying to get across, twice as much fentanyl as was, the U.S. was able to recover. So this is where, like I said, a lot of this is a facade. Is that the Mounties, the Border Patrol, was actually able to capture more fentanyl than the United States was able to. So again, we
the baddies?
We're the baddies in this instance.
Wow.
Yeah. There's other things going on here. Like I said, they're trying to score a big W, and I think a good way to look at it is, Trump he's the deal maker, right? So he has to make this big negotiating win. And I think it really loses sight of things because there are things that they accomplished pretty well, right? Like the Abraham Accords. That's pretty freaking, a big accomplishment for the previous administration of Trump, first time around. I think they're just looking for something big like that on trade.
You used one of my favorite slogans. I use it at work. I'm in sales, if anybody knows me. You were tripping over dollars to pick up pennies.
Yep.
And actually, that's maybe a way that we can describe the gutting of USAID. Because what happens when you're supporting Africa and the Middle East for years and years with all of these social programs, and then all of a sudden one day you pull the plug? They're not going to be happy, and they're going to go look at China and say, will you guys help us? And China's going to help them.
And they already are. They're
going to help them in a lot of a different way. Because when you say DEI in the Middle East, I don't think you're talking about hiring black people, okay? You're talking about a little bit of a different type of DEI in a way where, listen, when you have Sharia law, you need DEI. Like, I don't like DEI.
I think
you need it there.
I think it's a conflated concept. I don't think people listen. And don't get me wrong. The Matt Walsh movie shows that there's people who run with this certification and they just they're
sure. Oh yes. It's a grift for sure.
They're ideologues. They're not pragmatists of any kind, right? But the goal of things like DEI is to be as inclusive as possible. So I love to point out this perfect example. If you are anything but a Chinese male, an Asian male in the actuary industry, you're going to benefit, right? So if you're a white male, you're a female of any kind, you really, like I said, if you're just not an Asian male, your chances of getting an interview are much greater in that industry, the actuary industry. That's kind of like underwriters and stuff like that.
Does that mean that the CCP, like as they control this hiring process, is seeking out DEI policies?
Absolutely. No.
No, they really are.
But what it is it's just trying to expand the diversity of ideas and thinking styles. And unfortunately, just Asian males dominate, and I mean absolutely dominate the actuary industry. So, just to try to break up.
In Asia?
No, in the United States.
I thought you were talking about in China.
No. So I'm saying in the United States, right? So
okay, I'll believe that.
This is the funky part about DEI, right? So like I said, if you're a white male, you're much more likely to get an interview. And that's the whole point of the DEI, is not to guarantee you a job. It's equity of opportunity. It's to make sure that, at least you have the opportunity to earn that job. That's the
I see
whole
what you're
goal of
saying.
it.
Well, you've brought it to a great place, because this is probably the last topic I wanted to talk about. It's one of our, it's one of our colleagues, one of our competitors, another podcast here on YouTube. They are quite a bit bigger than us, but we're in the same field here. The Whatever podcast recently tweeted, and if no one's familiar with them, I'll get to that. But here's what they tweeted. The Whatever podcast tweets, "At no other point in human history have women enjoyed more freedom, more rights, more privileges, more comfort, the best healthcare, the best food, the best entertainment, much or all of which is a direct result of male benevolence, ingenuity, labor, and genius. And yet, simultaneously, at no other point in human history have women had so much hate, spite, contempt, disrespect, and ungratefulness towards men as today. Total feminist ideological capture. It is both evil and sad." So it's important to understand what the Whatever podcast is. They are specifically engineered to bring on the two most extreme people and groups, where they literally go from the most grotesque OnlyFans person, and I'm not even saying someone who does OnlyFans is necessarily inherently grotesque. I'm saying like the one who proudly goes around with disgusting stuff that will get us banned if I say it. And that's who they seek out. And then on the other side of the table, they don't only have like I'm a Republican. They have, I am a Christian nationalist. If anybody self-labels themselves as a Christian nationalist, you need to back away from that person, because that's really bleeding into fascism. It's actually, James Lindsay, you're coming on our podcast one day. There are two sides to this, right? The woke left, which we know focuses on identity politics, but then the woke right, who does the same thing. You've got this socialism, and then you've got this fascism. And what you've got on the Whatever podcast is these two lines of thinking, these two ideologies. You will never have a normal conversation. That's what they've engineered.
Absolutely.
But here's why this is a problem. Good. Go get your clicks, Justin, right? Go do it. But the thing is that now you've pervaded the mainstream. You are mainstream.
Yeah.
And Whatever podcast is pushing people that are not mainstream. They are putting fringe ideologies out there as mainstream. And now they're summarizing their conversation that they've had to say, women hate men. Women have the best healthcare. Men don't have the best healthcare. Men don't hate women. Look at your guests, bro, on Whatever.
Yeah.
Like, this is so backwards, and it's so corrosive. This is the reason, not the Whatever podcast. I don't even think they've been out for 8 years, but this is the reason we have the corrosive partisan punditry that we have, and what we're trying to break through, because they are making it so if you don't think the way that person on your side of the table thinks, or you don't think the way that other person on your other side of the table thinks, then you don't fit in, and you better start to acquiesce. I'm not going to do that.
Bravo. It's the thing that we struggle with every week, is we talk about, we could go viral next week by just continuing to just dive into audience capture and just bringing on the most corrosive guests, because corrosivity unfortunately attracts attention, and that's what gets you clicks. But, I have some amount of integrity that I don't want to sacrifice for the sake of the show. But that is the goal and the mission here, right? We bring on people from both sides of, or I don't even want to say two sides, right? Because even then it seems too linear. We're just here to elevate good ideas, so where people fall on the political spectrum after that fact is really irrelevant. It's about the information here. So that's why I'm also really excited about other upcoming guests that we have in there, and I won't give away too much, but we're going to start talking about, the Asia and foreign policy area. We're going to have some critical minerals and conversations around that. Again, a little bit more advancing on, why it's important that we get a hold on China and things like that. So I'm really thankful to all the viewers that continue to tune in all the time to our show here. You're what makes it worth it every week, and we appreciate all your patronage, and we look forward to serving you every week.
Yeah, well, beautifully said, Mike. And actually, that's a great place to put a cap on it. Guys, please hit that subscribe button. Share our video if you think someone else might enjoy it. And we will keep showing up in your feed once a week. This has been Elevated Thoughts.